Good afternoon. It is Thursday, September 26th, 2013. This is Jason Horak reporting on the Dodge Daytona electric vehicle. As you may have noticed in earlier videos, we had quite a time out at the Electric Vehicle Converters Convention, EVCCON, in Cape Girardeau, Missouri this year. Just lots of series of unfortunate events occurred. Ended up blowing up my charger, blew up 3 DC-to-DC converters, overcharged my batteries quite severely, melted a cell terminal during the drag race event, and also lost a chunk of paint off of my rear bumper, and that kind of made it sort of an eyesore, and I didn't end up attending the car show and parade events. Nor the drag race day down in Sikeston. We did do the drag racing at the airport and the autocross. That was a lot of fun. But the next day down in Sikeston, I just didn't feel the car was up to the 30-mile drive to then do drag racing and then 30 miles back. Yeah, anyway. So, since I've been back, I've been busy painting. As you can see, the front bumper is all painted and shiny now, and the rear bumper is painted and shiny. So that's all taken care of. But today is the 26th, and I have a car show on the 28th up in Syracuse, in Cicero, that I've been asked to come attend. It's sort of a electric vehicles and so forth show. There's going to be a bunch of Nissan Leafs and Chevy Volts and possibly a Tesla or two, and a Ford Focus electric. So they wanted somebody to come with their home-built electric vehicle and kind of to show the contrasts and so forth. And I really wanted to put in a good showing, so I've been hard at work trying to get the car show-worthy in order to go to this particular show. So anyway, what I've been doing is, as you can see, I've got some batteries out here, and these are these 4 are the ones from the mid battery box. And I pulled those out because of this one. This is the cell that I melted down at Cape Girardeau. Basically what happened was, after drag racing for the entire day, pulling 1,000 amps out of this poor little battery with a terminal. Basically this is the cell that used to sit right here where this foam is, and this jumper cable connects the cell over there to this one, and these were connected like this, and then it was actually connected up here. So this terminal is kind of in the middle of the pack. It's not pack positive or pack negative, but it had gotten a little bit of corrosion underneath it. Maybe it had gotten wet, or just wasn't cleaned quite as well as all the rest. I'm not really sure, but anyway, so it had loosened up a little bit, and after pulling 1,000 amps through it the whole day, this is what happened. So the little cap just melted, all the plastic got all gooey and nasty, and you can see that some of the cap actually got melted to the terminal. The top there, of course the camera isn't focusing very well, anyway, you can see that there's big chunks of the plastic as the terminal has started to sink down into the top of the battery. It's not very much. I mean, it's I think we caught it in time before there's any real significant damage. So I could probably scrape that plastic away and the cell would be fine. We did break the bolt off just getting the terminal out of there. We figured we needed that strap off as quickly as possible and needed to get the cell out of the car, and in the process ended up breaking off the bolt. But because the battery did get very warm, in particular in this region around the terminal, I'm not going to trust it in the car anymore. I'm just kind of, we'll call this a safety check and take it out. So the battery does actually work just fine. So I got the multimeter here on it, and so we're showing 3.3 volts 3.303. It was on the charger at the time when we took it off. It was kind of approaching fully charged, but it wasn't fully charged yet. And yeah, it was really hot. So we got it out of there. We ended up taking out basically these 3 cells just to give lots of airflow and let all 3 of those cool. And had them sitting on the shop at the floor at the EVTV shop in order to just allow them to cool for the night and not cause any problems. Other than the terminal being melted, the cell does not show any physical signs of damage. It's not swollen at all. You know, it looks just fine, and I'm pretty sure that it would work just fine if I cleaned up that terminal, but I just don't want to risk it, you know. Yes, I'm sacrificing a little bit of my range by not having the 60th cell in there, but with 59, I think it's close enough. So, anyway, because I'm going to a car show, I didn't want to have a big old ugly piece of foam in missing battery up front here. So that's why I ended up pulling these other 4 rather, out of the mid battery box, which is really a pain in the butt to get to. I'm going to see what I can do about making that a little better as well. So these cells are all perfectly fine. They were in that mid battery box, you know, well cushioned and so forth, and the terminals were cleaned properly and secure, so that there weren't any issues. So I'm going to take one of these cells just at kind of at random and jam that up here in the front where everyone sees it. And then the other 3 are going back in the mid battery box with just a little bit of different you know, padding on either side to compensate for the missing cell. So anyway, that's what's going on with the batteries. So I just wanted to give everyone a little update there. Oh, just while we're at it, I will use the meter here to measure each of these cells. They were not fully charged when I pulled them out of here. The whole pack was down a little bit from driving. I hadn't charged up, so 3.333 on that one. And this one is 3.333. And this one is 3.333. And last but not least is, if I can get the things to stay in there long enough to show them on camera, 3.333. In fact, they're all 3.3331, which is even more interesting. So they're perfectly balanced at whatever charge they're at, and they should be the same as all the rest of the cells in the pack, since I haven't charged or discharged since I pulled them out. So anyway, so that is the plan with the batteries. Just wanted to give you that overview, because once I get them all stowed back in the mid battery box, they're like impossible to see. And just while we're on that topic, I will show you the mid battery box, since I've got everything out. So that's where it is. So that's underneath the rear seats, down in there, and they lay flat right across, as seen in an earlier video where I actually made this box. And so the terminals face backwards, which end up actually facing up against, not sure while the camera's making this out, but there's another piece of foam. It's completely lined with foam, the blue foam insulation inside, and that is that. This is where the charger plugs in. The new charger, the PFC50, Brian, and I'm going to brutalize his last name, so I'm not going to say it, Coco something or other. Anyway, he was very helpful in that he got that installed in the car for me. He actually did this connector, and then this is where I plug in. This is just a little NEMA 14-50 plug where the charger plugs into for the AC. That is very simply wired to the outside charge port on the side. So Anyway, so that is the wiring. That is the setup for the mid battery box and all that good stuff. So since I'm back here, I guess we'll go and talk about my planned changes for this plug. So this NEMA 14-50 plug. Well, I guess I should go into the whole overcharge incident. Yeah, so out at EVCCON, we were charging the car and everything was going along hunky-dory fine on day one. Just when I first got there, plugged it in, started charging outside, and what had happened was that the little push button voltage settings on the Manzanita charger had gotten pushed by accident during shipping. I'm not sure if someone hit it when they were getting into the back seat to plug in a seat belt or what, but either way, it was set to 200 volts higher than it should have been. So where it was supposed to stop at 210 volts, it was going to stop at 410, which probably would have been a nice pillar of fire where my car used to be. So luckily, we caught it in time, and that is what blew up the first DC-to-DC converter, was simply overcharging the cells, which had gotten to 269 volts for a 60-cell pack, which is kind of ridiculous. But anyway, so that was that whole incident. Well, I was talking with Dale Friedhoff, who has this really nice electric truck. I think it's a Ranger, if I recall correctly, a Red Ranger. And he was telling me that his solution to preventing mishaps like that was to use the JLD 404 and its outputs. It has a couple different relays that you can hook up to different things, and so what his suggestion was is to hook it up so that when the battery voltage gets to a certain point that's well above norm, you know, I was charging to 210 before, so let's say it got to 215. At that point, it would disconnect the battery or the charger. It would leave the charger connected to the battery pack, but disconnect the AC coming into the charger, which is by virtue of disconnecting each of the two sides here. So there are the two phases on the AC, and then that's the neutral and the ground. And so by putting a contactor on each of those two phases, you can actually toggle it off and effectively unplug the charger electrically. And so to that end, my master plan is to use this little box. So this is a Square D breaker panel box for like mounting on the outside of your house. And I took this, or bought this at Lowe's, and I think it was 25 bucks. It was not very expensive at all. Inside it, it was kind of, you know, set up like this inside, with this 50 or 60 volt, sorry, 50 or 60 amp AC breaker, which I'm not going to use. I just took this out and we're going to throw it away or use it for some other project. But what I wanted was the case, this nice little box which was hinged on the side. It seemed like it would be just about the right size for a pair of contactors and a NEMA 14-50 outlet. So my master plan is that I'm going to wire up these contactors to the JLD 404 so that when one of the relays kicks on the JLD, it's going to cause these contactors to turn off, at which point it will break the two phases. So it'll be the phase coming in from the wall, or in this case from my charge port, and going out to this plug. So just one of the phases to this plug will be on this side, and the other phase will be on this side. And then what will happen is that when power is removed from there, it will unplug the charger and nothing will happen, which is exactly what we want to have happen if we're in an overcharge scenario and for some reason the charger did not stop like it's supposed to. So anyway, so this little box, I'll be drilling a hole in the top here and to put this, mounting this through, and then it'll look something about like that, where you can plug right into, and it'll just have the cord coming out going to the charge port. So it'll go from the charge port there underneath, and instead of being just this plug with the NEMA 14-50, it will go instead be going into this box and doing pretty much the same thing, albeit with a couple contactors to break the circuit if things go horribly wrong. So anyway, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to get that all wired up with the relay quite yet. I don't want it to cycle to keep turning the charger on and off and on and off, but because of the way that the batteries tend to, like the voltage will increase quite steadily as you're charging, and especially when you're in an overcharge situation, they're going to go up quite rapidly. When you remove power, they tend to fall, but not quite as rapidly. So it will turn the charger off, it'll fall down to below the 215 mark, and then it'll come back up. So I'd like to set up the GLD so that somehow the relays keep it off entirely, so that if it trips, it basically says, okay, we're done, you're not going to get any more charging until it's manually addressed in some way. And you know, that way when plugging in the car to charge, if I notice that the charger doesn't turn on, I'll be like, oh, alright, something's up, I need to go look at something and take a look at what's going on. So anyway, that is the master plan for that. I'm not sure if that's going to get implemented before the car show on Saturday, but at least that's kind of the direction that I'm heading in, and you know, basically following. Dale Friedhoff was nice enough to make a diagram, which I'll have to get a shot of here, that just he was up late at night at the hotel room going, oh, I really got to write this up because I don't think Jason understands what I'm talking about, and so he made a nice little diagram that shows how to wire it up, which honestly is pretty straightforward, but I thought it was very nice of him to go through that effort. Anyway, so that is a couple projects going on. And last but not least, as noted, I blew up a bunch of DC-to-DC converters. So this is the new shiny 800 watt. Not sure if the camera will make out the label on here, but this is the 800 watt DC-to-DC converter that Jack sells. I bought it from him there at the convention, and I had first installed it in the car with the cords facing this way, just to get the thing running. It was all kind of cobbed together just to make it go. As you can see, I had to move the canister. This is for the power brake booster, just because that was in that spot where this giant thing had to go. But anyway, so today I flipped it around, so now we've got the cords going out toward the bottom, and that leaves the label up here, and kind of makes the clutter of the wiring a lot less bad. It's all kind of tucked down in there and goes straight across and over. So anyway, that's the DC-to-DC converter. And I did have a question on one of the other videos regarding the diode for the DC-to-DC converter, if I was using Jack's recommended configuration, and I was. In fact, what I've got here, this is my little box that it connects in to the AC, or sorry, to AC, the input is coming directly from the pack positive and the pack negative, and it goes along this little wire right here, whoosh, up into here. And so rather than having these this inductor and the diode like stuck onto the DC-to-DC converter, I put them in this little box, and there you go. So figured waterproof or would be good. And so that is the little diode that's in there. I'm only using one side of it. There are actually two diode pieces here. I'm only using the one. And then this is the inductor that Jack was originally selling with the DC-to-DC converters, but then determined that it wasn't really performing any function, so he stopped including them. I had it here from before, so I'm just leaving it in there. I'm not sure if it's doing any good or any harm, but it's just kind of there. So, but on I think it was Eric who posted on a comment on my YouTube video, he was asking me about the diode, and I wanted to show him how it's wired in. And so the output actually goes to this little computer style plug, which then goes to this little monitor style plug, and this is what's connecting it over there to the DC-to-DC converter. So this way I can disconnect the DC-to-DC converter from the input side just by unplugging that, and then I actually have a what are they called? Brain fade, one of these little plugs, Anderson connectors, there we go. Little Anderson connector on the other side for the low voltage, the 12 volt, so I can disconnect it from that very easily. So anyway, that is the deal and how it was wired up. So anyway, I wanted to thank Eric, again I think it was Eric, for asking about that, because as it turned out, the old diode, the one that was actually in here, is fried. It's fused open or whatever. I mean, it looks fine on the outside, but when I tested it today, it's passing current in both directions, so it's not doing its diode function anymore on the side that was actually wired in. The other side is fine, but since I had a couple extra of these that came with other DC-to-DC converters I bought, I figured I might as well just use a brand new one and call it good. So that was in there and wasn't actually doing what it was supposed to anymore, so that's good to test, and now it's replaced with one that works. So anyway, I'm going to get this all secured up here. We're going to get that other battery put in, and the DC-to-DC converter wiring all kind of stuffed down in where it belongs. So we now have kind of a space here where one of the DC-to-DC converters was in here, but this just allows me to get to my 12 volt wiring. That's the main ground for the car that goes to here, and you know, just allows it to be easier. So anyway, I will be back once I get things all put back together. Alrighty then, so it ended up taking longer than I anticipated, well into the wee hours last night, but I got everything put back together, and the car kind of shined up. Nice fresh coat of WD-40 on all the paint. So we're ready to go for the show tomorrow. And so, as you can see, the front battery box is back to normal, where it has all 26 cells up front, and with the top left cell being the one that came from the mid battery box and has been relocated here. So now the mid battery box has just 3 cells in it, but all the terminals have been cleaned and so forth. So that's all ready to go. Tidied up the wiring a little bit, just basically making sure that everything was looking good for the show tomorrow. And I'm going to try to take some video outside for kind of an intro video to what the car looks like. Now that it's kind of all together and has been running for a while, I'd like to take some pictures and a video that kind of shows, you know, what that's all about. So anyway, we'll go ahead and take a look in the back. And as you can see, I have the enormous Manzanita PFC 50 reinstalled back here, and we're connecting it with this larger Anderson connector, and this is the one that Brian from the convention, Brian Cocotran, hope I didn't brutalize his name too bad. Anyway, the one that he installed in the car for me, and what the charger came with. So they're kind of a modular plug. You can put the red and black on either side when you set them up, but then once they're together, they form a plug. So that's kind of cool. So that's set up here. It is rated for more than 50 amps. I don't forget if they're 100, something like that. But it's way more than this PFC 50 charger can put out. So the panel is still accessible with it located in a spot, and you know, I can get to all the stuff and turn the dial down before plugging it in and so forth. Lastly, the charger is not plugged in. I'm just using the regular plug here, which I'll put into a J1772 converter box, David Kurzel's unit, tomorrow when I'm up in Syracuse. But normally I would have it plugged in to the mid battery box and then over here to the external charge port, but I want to redo that whole wiring setup, and it's kind of in the middle of the process at this point, so we're gonna just go with what we got. Also, while I was working on the car, you can see that it's up here on the jack stands again, so that I could get underneath it and take a look at the battery boxes. Most specifically, I wanted to do some caulking on the mid battery box, which is very hard to see, but along the edges of the mid battery box there was a spot where it was possible to get various debris and stuff in. So anyway, that's where we're at there. Got that all taken care of, so I'm going to get the car pulled down off the jack stands, and we should be ready to go for the show tomorrow up in Syracuse. So should be a good time. But in the meantime, everyone have a wonderful evening and take care.